Good evening, and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and the city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's case is tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony, bless you. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Freed?
Here.
Ms. Herron?
Here.
Mr. Kanar? Mr. Kalp?
Here.
Ms. Messina? Ms. Pearson?
Here.
Mr. Tababin?
Here.
And Mr. Warner.
Here.
We have 7 for a quorum.
Thank you. We have the minutes from the April 18th meeting. Are there any changes or revisions? Not hearing any, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second? Would you please take the vote, Chris?
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kalp?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Tababin?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. First off, it's just great to be back in person. Good to see everybody. So welcome back. Next we have on the agenda is declaration of conflict of interest and ex parte communications by members of the commissioner staff. Any issues? All right, not seeing any. We will then move on to action items. Item 1, which is Z2202, which is the downtown D3 rezoning by the Topeka Planning Commission. Ask staff to proceed. Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, this is the last of the downtown zoning projects. D1 and D2 rezonings have previously been approved by you and the governing body. Just a quick little reminder of what the D districts are. So D1, which you approved late last year, is a mixed-use district for the core of downtown. D2 is a mixed-use district meant for new urban residential neighborhoods. And D3 is light industrial mixed-use districts. That's what we're talking about tonight. Quick little bit of information on process to date. So we had informational meetings with property owners last year in 2021 in August and October. Since a bit of time had passed from those meetings and also from when we notified them for the zoning initiation that you approved in November, we decided to include property owners in the April 21st neighborhood information meeting. So that meeting had property owners along with owners of property within 300 feet. We had a good turnout for that meeting, answered some questions at that time. So all told, we've notified property owners on this particular rezoning 4 times. And then the map you've got there shows the buffer area around those properties. That's the 300-foot buffer for the notification for the NIM. So this rezoning, you can see on the map there, the highlighted properties are the properties proposed for this rezoning. 61 properties, encompasses approximately 62 acres. You can see roughly where those are relative to downtown. One thing to note is that uses are not proposed to change with this rezoning. Existing land uses will be allowed to remain. And this zoning change would make one property non-conforming. This is a good time to talk about the text amendment changes that we had. We brought forth those changes with the D1 zoning. You may recall when we brought that, What we did was look at all of the D districts to make sure that the uses in those in the use matrix reflected kind of what's going on the ground. In particular, with D3, we made some significant additions to D3. So we added warehouse, storage, and distribution to the matrix, manufacturing, processing type 2, research lab, machinery, and equipment repair and restoration. So these are just a few of the uses that were added to D3 and have been approved. So these are uses that are part of D3 currently. Primarily, we're looking at industrial zoning that's being rezoned to D3. There is some other kind of limited zoning as well from D1 and C4. So, but primarily, we're going from I1 and I2 to D3. The zoning is consistent with our future land use plan from our land use and growth management plan. It's also consistent with the recently adopted downtown master plan, which had a step to implement this zoning throughout downtown. Staff's recommendation is approval of the D3 downtown zoning. With that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, two quick questions on the staff report of the listing of uses that are permitted in D3. And I think this is not an exclusive listing, I said, right? But I got two questions for you. About 4 inches down on the list, you mentioned parking and surface lots in association with the principal use. Could you have a surface lot that is just a surface lot that is not associated with the principal use?
Good question, Commissioner Kaup. I don't have my use matrix with me. I know that we changed parking in association with a principal use to a conditional use permit or a special use. So it's one or the other. A standalone parking in D3, it's a conditional use permit.
Yeah, and I meant to look at that up myself, and I didn't take the time to do it. So, is there an answer?
Yeah, it's a conditional use permit.
Okay, let's see. The other question, Dan, is it lists micro alcohol production. What is micro alcohol production?
That's kind of based on how state law defines those uses, but it's basically small scale, beer production, distillery, those kind of uses, and there's a limitation on the volume that can be produced, so that's what makes it micro. So a big operation, a big brewery type use that's like Budweiser is not micro, so it's like Blind Tiger potentially is micro, that.
Can that be done in association with actual consumption, a drinking establishment?
Yeah, in a brew pub, for instance, yeah, those two can coexist.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, this is where we would then have the owner or representative of the owner come present, but the city is presenting, right, and has done so already. So then I will move forward to open the public hearing and invite any members of the public who wish to comment on this item. Please come forward.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just since we haven't done this in a while, just a reminder, we have adopted the council practice of 4 minutes initially. If you want to extend more time to the speaker, you can with your consent. And then, yes, so. And start with name and address, yes.
Yes.
Yes, if you may.
Okay. I am Michelle Hofer, 216 Southwest Fairlawn Road. I am one of the owners of JT Lardner Cutstone. We have multiple properties in the D3 proposed zoning area. First one is our main shop at 128 Northwest Van Buren. We've been there since 1937, only because they built the Topeka Boulevard Bridge, and we were forced out of our location on Topeka Boulevard. The next one is 134 Northwest Van Buren. We acquired that building from the city of Topeka around mid-1980s. It's a WPA building that was built in the 1940s. We also have 31, 33, and 35 Cells Block, which is on Jackson. We also acquired a good portion of that from the city. One building used to be the salt shed, where they mixed the salt and sand that they put on the streets. And we also own the half block on Harrison Street that runs from First Street to Crane, and it's a full half block. We are probably the oldest operating business in that neighborhood, well, the smaller neighborhood, between the bridges, between Second and Kansas River. My grandfather started the business in 1903. I also know, because of my grandfather, this was one of the first industrial park, or was the first industrial park in the city of Topeka. It went from basically Topeka Boulevard clear over to the Santa Fe grounds, and then from the Kansas River down to approximately 3rd Street, maybe a little bit further on the east side. Now, as for me, what many of you don't know, I've been on the Planning Commission, and I was a chair at one time, so I understand most of what's going on with this. And I was kind of surprised when the D3 zoning came up, because I always believed that it was the property owner that initiated it. I'd forgotten that the city has the ability to initiate. So I was a little dismayed, I guess, that somebody was coming in and telling me what they wanted to change my property to, since we had had it forever and this had always been industrial use, and that's how we've always seen it as continuing. We're not the only ones that were surprised by the change in zoning. Okay, my time on the zoning commission, there were a few things that I learned. One was you don't spot or island zone. As years have gone by, the buildings that are along Kansas Avenue on both sides have become PUDs or mixed use, splitting the west side that was industrial and the east side that was industrial. In the zoning, they're only changing what is essentially the west side, and they're leaving Hills, the old Hallmark plant, Kansas Gas Service, everybody on that side, they're leaving alone. So we're feeling a little isolated by doing this, and it doesn't sit well with several of us. Since I'm down. There are plenty of places in Topeka. One thing's been brought up, they need more places for mixed use. There's plenty of places in D1 and D2 that have already been passed that can be used for mixed use. I think it's too early to go to D3. And at any time somebody comes in, they want to buy my property, they have that right to come back and they can change it. I would like to let them be able to do that. I feel like everything's getting kind of pushed ahead and we're getting pushed out.
Ma'am, your 4 minutes is up.
Yep. I do want to make sure, I was asked, did you get the email from H.T. Paul?
Yes.
Okay,
From Paul Properties?
from Paul Properties.
Yes, we did.
They wanted me, since she couldn't come, she wanted me to make sure that you got that.
We all have a copy sitting in front of us tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the commission on this issue? Okay, not seeing any, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Are there any questions? I guess I should have asked while she was up. Does anyone have any questions for the person from the public who was made comment?
I actually did have a question.
Okay. Ma'am, could you come back up, please? I'm sorry.
You had made the comment in reference to feeling like you were, you and a few other members of the community were feeling like they were getting pushed out. And so I just wanted to understand a little bit more context behind how the zoning is creating that feeling.
Well, part of the neighborhood is getting pushed out for the viaduct. If you look at some of the uses that they're proposing that are in the use matrix, some of the uses have been talked about by GTP for future reference or future use, like the research buildings for the pet health corridor. And that's been talked about for our neighborhood. Hills is right down Green Street. And so it feels like most of us are small businesses. I have 12 of us in our company. Lindy Spring has quite a few more. But it just feels like, and I know about the River Advisory Committee because I'm on it, and I know what they want to do. So it just feels like everybody's wanting to just push us out of business and start working towards a future of changing everything in the neighborhood, putting in office buildings, research facilities. I have a neighbor who wants to buy one of my buildings for a microbrewery, which is probably where that came up. It just doesn't feel like we're wanted. Feels like we'll get rid of them eventually. If we get their zoning changed, it'll make it easier for somebody to come in and move into the industrial area, and they won't have to go through zoning, and there'll be less control over what is put in. There'll be some control, but if it's included in the D3 zoning, you can't rezone them. So that's one of the reasons, or the main reason I feel like we're being pushed.
Okay, thank you for explaining. I'm sorry that you feel that way.
I've been around a long time, so I've seen a lot of things happen over the years. I've also seen that there's very little industrial property in town. You've probably never seen an industrial case. One of the last ones would have been Hansa Park, I believe. And I was on the planning commission, so it was over 10 years ago. So there's not a whole lot of places that we could move and rebuild. And the people that are getting forced out by KDOT are having problems finding property that would be suitable for industrial. I hope that answers it.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions while she's still here?
I do have a quick question. What is your vision for the area if this doesn't happen?
I would hope that our businesses would continue to grow. They say that we should be able to live with whatever moves in. I don't know if you've ever driven through the area. It's been kind of an overlooked area for a long time. But everyone in the neighborhood has employed a lot of people over the years and helped pay property taxes, helped the city grow. And we want to continue to do that. As far as the vision, I just want to see us continue to work. I mean, there's enough people having a hard time getting a job or enough people not wanting to work, but we're hoping to keep our end of the bargain up and paying our property taxes and payroll taxes and everything else.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Sure. All right. Again, I don't believe there were any other comments, so the public hearing is closed, if I didn't say that already. Are there any further questions of staff?
Mr. Chair, I'm kind of
Mr.
curious,
Dean?
what does happen with an existing building like a Lardner? Does anything change with this? It just, whatever happens in the future, it changes what can be done in the future, is that right? But the existing building, existing uses wouldn't change at all, or don't have to change?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah, any redevelopment of the property, that's when the zoning would potentially kick in. The zoning doesn't change, except for that one property we've identified as non-conforming. Doesn't change existing uses, or doesn't impact existing uses, I should say.
So if they were to, for instance, sell their business to another entity, would that future entity also be able to continue doing the same business?
Yeah, so the zoning rights, they run with the land, basically, so not with owners.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody for staff? The email that was received raised the issue about the mixing of people moving in and then complaints about industrial uses as a way of driving out. I don't know, in your research of doing the D3, I assume you looked at other cities that had something similar maybe. Did you find that to be an issue, or do you anticipate that as an issue when you made the recommendation to go to D3?
It potentially could be an issue, but we have examples in that River South area where we rezoned property to D3 along Kansas Avenue there, the mill block, and that's, all of those properties have some residential use, in particular the one on the corner that's, multi-units. So it's possible, it's possible these uses can coexist, and those people leave for the day to go to work and come back, and then the businesses have left for the day. Yeah, that's.
If I can add on to what Mr. Warren was getting at, this is tough. There's no doubt, because what you have is a transition from a past to a future sort of vision. This is not any different than what many downtowns and riverfronts have gone through over across the country, because I would say is following suit in that path. The riverfront has long been, many cities turned their back on the riverfront and developed industrial, zoned it for industrial, redeveloped it for intensive uses. And so I don't think Topeka is any different in the fact that there is desire to rediscover that area, and from a non-industrial standpoint, opening it up to the public more for access to the river, live in the area, to frequent it with whether it's shops or just very unique character, and I think that's the one thing here that we've tried to recognize, and when we brought this to you last year, is there is a need to balance the interests down here. We've heard that very clear. This is not a plan or a zoning to move anybody out. It's to prepare for what we believe is to come. And if we're going to have existing businesses in an area, we want to, and we know there is a market and demand for a new uses. We want to have a zoning and a planning vision that accommodates both the best we can. And so balancing those interests, accommodating a mix of uses, so that it is this is a transitional period, really, in the history of this area. One transitional period in the history of this area, kind of rediscovering that area for different uses. And so how do you do that? And without disrupting the viability of the uses that are there. That is the challenge. We think we've done everything we can from a zoning standpoint, at least, to accommodate existing uses, have some standards for any expansion of uses, industrial uses, particularly from an outside storage standpoint. We've eliminated or are proposing to eliminate the most intensive industrial, which is a type 3 manufacturing. So you're lopping off a very, we don't have any down there in the D3 proposed area, but it does give some assurance that that is not a use or set of uses that would be permitted anymore. So I think there's that, and then the introduction of a residential component. So that's really the keys, and we're not trying to gloss over the fact that this is absolutely a tough balancing of interests here. We think we've done as much as we really can. We've also recognized setting aside and reserving industrial is important. We've done that through the downtown master plan, the river to rail district for the most part. I think all told, of all the downtown industrial south of the river, down to Penn Street, over to Topeka Boulevard, and to the rail yards, you still have over 50% of that is reserved in I-1 or I-2 plan and zoning, and that's even with this change. So this is there's a little bit less than half of the whole industrial zoned and planned area that would be converted here, but that would be a little bit over half that would be preserved for industrial. So didn't want to take the approach to do it at a scale that does not recognize the need to have some exclusive industrial. So that's important to point out. So you're really at a policy evolution here, if you will, of what this area is to become, and do we prepare for it, or do we have a sort of a case-by-case basis where the property owner comes in one at a time and does that? And I'll make one last comment about that, because the way this is set up, the D3 and the D districts in general, they're district-wide, they're area-wide type districts. And in zoning in general, you want to have some uniformity, block to block to block. So if you just have a policy that says, yes, we will support mixed use if they come to us on a property by property basis, you can, that's what you have right now. That's what the plan says. You can do that, and you can adopt, and you can rezone basically as you go. Problem we see with that is it does create some conflicts that the effect would be some property would be having different standards than their neighbor, and that can be an issue in terms of what you want to achieve here. If the policy and the future vision that's been adopted is to try and move towards a mixed-use riverfront and downtown, then yeah, that's going to be this is going to be the type of implementation you would look at. If you want to move towards, well, we'll just do it on an as-you-go basis, then yeah, you just know that would create another set of issues that for the area and may undermine some of the vision for it. So I'm going to stop talking.
Are there one follow-up to that? So if someone else wanted to come in and have a small industrial operation, much as we've heard about tonight, that's still available for them to move in under this zoning in theory?
That is correct. I also don't want to bury that headline, which is the industrial, certainly the I-1 portion of our zoning book is still intact in the D3 district. And as I said, some of the higher end I-2, more intensive I-2 is what we eliminated. So yes, if you want to do anything that's allowed in I-1, basically as a new use, not just an existing use, but you want to come in and establish a new use, then you've got pretty wide latitude under the D3 with, like I said, the exception of some of the outside storage type standards, which is just some screening standards that we've adopted or has been adopted here in the last half year.
Thank you. Mr. Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the memo from Paul Properties Management, that is part of the record in this rezoning. So there's one thing in here I wanted to respond to, and I guess it's a direct question towards staff, and particularly Mary. Mary, 4 lines down in the memo, it stated that there are more reasons not to pass this zoning change than to pass it. And that's making reference to the golden factors that are on the flip side of the other side of the memo. The reference to the city zoning regulations, the 8 factors that are known as the golden factors. And I just wanted to hear from you if you're in agreement that those 8 factors are not a scorecard. It's not as though if you have 5 factors favoring rezoning and 3 against it, that the rezoning goes forward. The law in Kansas has never been that we assign whatever weight we think is appropriate to any of those factors, and in any given rezoning, one or more of those factors may not even be relevant to the particular rezoning. So I just wanted to make clear that in case this issue comes in front of the Planning Commission any time in the future, that the golden factors are not, the 8 golden factors are not to be looked at as a scorecard.
That's right, they're just simply guidelines, and you can put as much weight on each of the factors as you feel is justified by the evidence.
And any one of those factors, I may place more importance on it than another member of the Planning Commission, or less importance.
That's correct.
It's just the guidelines, the ones that are relevant are to be considered, and we give whatever weight we think is appropriate to any one of those factors.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
just to follow up with Commissioner Cobb, and those 8 factors have been analyzed in this report fairly nicely, so I think they've already done that.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with the statement that there are more factors.
I hear you. That was just a
cutting one way or the other.
generalization that.
And certainly a very important factor is the conformance to the adopted comprehensive plan, which I don't think there's any question that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the downtown master plan.
I agree.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Dean.
another question for staff. I'm just kind of curious, it came up. Why did it not go further to the east than it did? Is there a particular reason, or just a good spot?
Yes, Commissioner Dean, if you recall, the downtown master plan had districts set up, and so the east of Kansas Avenue, except for the Kansas Avenue corridor, more or less, that's what we referred to as the river to rail district. And so that's what I was talking about, is looking at an area to reserve for industrial. There has not been an introduction of mixed use in that area yet. Not that there couldn't be, but we also recognize the need for larger scale and smaller scale industrial areas without that sort of pressure, if you will, or allowance. So it followed the district plan, I think, that's why we stopped at that Kansas Avenue. And to some of the points made here, that's not what we're trying to accomplish by just mixed use everything in downtown. Downtown has many different functions, and as I said, there's about 130 acres of downtown that is solely planned for industrial use. We're taking a little bit less than half of that tonight to present to you, to take a chunk of that for the mixed-use part.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any questions of staff? Are there any other comments anyone from the commission would like to make? If not, I would then call for a motion regarding the proposal to rezone to D3.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cobb.
I would offer this motion that, based on the staff report, I move to recommend approval of the request to reclassify the property M2 ONI to C4 D1 I1 and I2 to D3 Downtown District.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Chris, would you please take a vote?
Just make sure there's any other discussion about this.
Oh, okay. Any other discussion about the motion now that's been made? All right, not hearing any. Now I'll call for a vote.
Mr. Warner,
Aye.
Mr. Teboven,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Mr. Kaup,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
and Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 with none abstaining.
All right, next on the agenda are communications to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had a couple to alert you to. There's our next meeting, the next meeting alert in June is not on our regular third Monday. And I think you know about this, but just a reminder, it'll be on June 22nd, which is a Wednesday, the Wednesday after the third Monday because of the Juneteenth holiday on the 8th, on the 20th. We will have a meeting. It was the other part of that. We do have a couple significant cases coming to you. If you remember the Holodome, we hope to have that at the meeting. You had already acted on that a year or so ago. 2 years ago, if you remember, 6th and Fairlawn. They're coming back. It may be next month where they're looking at changing their plan. So that could be on the agenda. And still the same use, still trying to do residential, but in a different format. And then we have a major plat outside the city. And then, and we also want to bring to you a follow-up to our discussion on the missing middle code amendments. We were hoping to, if we can get this done, kind of present to you a scope of work, if you will, kind of here's what you want us to do, we agree the objectives and the goals are to move forward with before we actually move forward with something. So we want to bring that hopefully back to you then. That is a preview. And last but not least, the cases that you heard last month, which was Lamar Billboard and the North Vista Apartments, they'll be heard tomorrow night at council. So they have not taken action on those yet. So that's all I have.
Thank you. If there's any other business, anyone?
Just had a quick question,
Yes, Ms.
if
Herron.
that's okay. At our last meeting, you had mentioned if any of the commissioners wanted to be a part of kind of what you were doing with the missing middle. Do you have any details as to what that looks like or what the ask is?
Commissioner Herron, I don't have anything specific ironed out other than we do want to know your interest if you feel like you would want to help. Could be a smaller working group on this, if so. So Am I to take that as interest or just the question?
It is interest. Okay. Yes, before I fully understand, I know what the yes is too.
Asking for a friend.
So it is a maybe tentatively.
Yes, we'll definitely, there's been one or two of you that have expressed interest, so
Okay.
we will be back in touch.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other last minute items? With that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
A second.
All right. And I think we're done. Thank you.
Okay.